I think one of my values in life is that I want to live the most interesting story for myself, right? Because we only get one life. And I was just thinking, like, can I really just for the next 15, 20 years, just day in, day out, do more privacy reviews. So for me, it made sense at some point just to take the leap because I just want to feel more passion, more I want to just pour my all into something and just see it kind of come to life. There are times where I wanted to just throw my laptop on the ground because I realized, oh shit, this is an off by one error and I don't know how to fix it. And sorry for the French. But yeah, I think if you have the motivation and you are genuinely excited to build, that energy is going to drive you forward, right? That curiosity to get it to the end.
All right. Welcome to the podcast, Sherry.
Thank you, Zane. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet you as well. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a few weeks now, so it's always exciting to meet someone in person. So before we dive into those parts, quick intro to Sherry. Sherry is the co-founder and CEO of Peak Money, which is an AI-powered personal CFO. I think that's how it's described on the website. Sherry will explain that in a little bit as well, but it looks extremely cool. But like I said, the way that she's dropped on my radar is all the cool stuff that she's building right now with AI. So without further ado, Sherry, can you give us a short intro into who you are and what you've done so far?
Absolutely. I'm one of the co-founders of Peak. We're building an AI-powered platform that helps you track and grow your net worth. We like to call it a personal finance CFO or AI-powered CFO in a way, because if you think about it, one thing that what is super nice about us having a CFO if you're a public company is, you have somebody who you can get snapshot answers around, okay, how's our balance sheet doing, right? What are the top 3 things I need to know or be aware of to make decisions? And I don't have any more time for that because I have a bunch of other things to do. And that's how I think a lot of busy professionals view finances as well. Personal finances are incredibly important, but then also, finding a way to manage it in a efficient time frame is something that is a challenge for a lot of people. So that's what we're aiming to solve with Peak. So just to share a little bit about my journey, perhaps with the listeners, I'm not a technical person in my background, right? I did work at Google and Amazon, but I was actually in more business and marketing, but I never got into code myself until I discovered Cursor this summer, actually. And it was, for me, one of the most powerful unlocks that I ever had. I can't even remember the last time I had that kind of mind-blowing moment in the last 10 years. I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people who are technical, and someone was like, look, I started to use Cursor as an engineer. Maybe you can use it as somebody who isn't technical. You just use natural language and basically start building applications. And I was thinking that was actually something that'd be very helpful for me because I wanted to, build more mini apps to kind of prototype and get validation for small ideas within Peak, but I didn't necessarily want to ask my engineering team to do all of it because they have a lot of core work to do. So I actually started to build these mini apps first. And even back, I would say when I started using Cursor, it was not nearly as advanced as it is today. So it was Streamlit and Python, and I would say limited in terms of the UI UX. And then I started to actually build more React-based apps recently because now you could with Cursor, and it was just a whole new level of unlock. So that's kind of right around the time I started to kind of get used to creating more fully built out front ends. And so that's why I decided to clone Google Finance and just see how the inner workings of that could be and how close you can actually get to the, actual app.
Oh, that's an awesome story. So I've used a little bit of Cursor as well, built some small things as well. For folks who are listening to this and they're probably thinking, okay, this Cursor thing sounds cool. I want to go build my own app, my own full stack app. What does someone who is non-technical, has never coded before in their life, need to know before they start using Cursor?
Yeah. So actually, I've been able to kind of test this out in the real world by actually doing a course on the side. So ever since, I started posting about my journey and everything. Like people have been reaching out saying like, hey, do you have any like videos or do you have any like documents where you create this? And I was like, I don't really have a course, but maybe I'll just spin something up together. So I did actually have the chance to see, okay, if you took people who are not technical and put them in a room for 6 hours, can they actually ship an app? And I will say that for people who do have some level of product sense or intuition, it is 100% possible to learn it 0 to 1 in 6 hours. At least the front end part of things, right? I think getting the full back end side with like a working database or getting external APIs, all that, I think that's a little bit more challenging past the 6-hour time frame that we had with the course, at least the very first one. And again, this is for people that I would say are maybe business development managers at like a tech company, or maybe they are a consultant that has worked on like tech projects before with tech companies, right? So I haven't been able to see what it's like for somebody who has zero background in tech at all. But I would say for somebody like that, instead of while diving straight into code, I think is a good thing. It is also helpful just to spend a little bit more time kind of figuring out how apps actually work, right? So if you're not quite at that point, I would say just study apps, spend some time going through some of the ones that you use on a day-to-day basis and apply a little bit more critical thinking. And then at some point, I think you could just pick it up and give it a try.
So I want to keep this conversation as accessible as possible to everyone who's coming in. So, for example, if someone doesn't know how to code or doesn't know a lot of these technical terms, so I just want to quickly say, front end basically refers to the graphical side of things, like, what the app looks like, what the website looks like. And backend is basically everything that's happening in the background. So, you have databases, you have things like APIs, which basically are pipes which connect one app to another app and so on. I don't want to dive too in, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of sense. And I think if you can just spend a few hours getting familiar with these basic things, like the difference between a web app and a mobile app, what the front end is, what the back end is, the sort of fundamentals of design, these are all things, honestly speaking, you can just ask ChatGPT or Claude, and it explains it to you. And whichever part you feel like you don't have a good understanding, you can just ask a follow-up question, and it tells you what to do next. But that's sort of like been my experience. But, do you have anything else you'd want to add there, Sherry?
Yeah, I absolutely think you nailed it on, like hit the nail on the hammer there. And I tell a lot of, the people that have been coming through my course, like the biggest skill in this class is not knowledge. The biggest skill in this class is knowing how to retrieve the knowledge, right? How to figure things out. And I tell people, right, just use ChatGPT, right? And some of the things that I love as well is you can use it as like a co-pilot almost, right? So you can take a screenshot, right, of let's say an app and just ask it, hey, this is what Amazon.com looks like. GPT is actually very, very good at explaining to you exactly how it's kind of built. And you can keep diving into each level deeper and deeper, right? You go into, okay, this is the checkout experience. Okay, part of the checkout experience is billing. Okay, how do you want to handle billing? Okay, here are these different options. You can use Stripe, you can use this. And you can get deeper and deeper, right? And do you want to do chargebacks or all that stuff? But you kind of start at the high level, and GPT is just such a great tool. I use GPT to help me as well. Like, when I use Cursor, I will tell you that there's times I don't always use I don't use 100%, like only the AI chats and Composer, which is the AI orchestrator in Cursor. Sometimes when I run into issues, I still go to GPT to kind of explain or walk me through things, right? So you have basically like a 24/7 like computer science professor who is extremely patient with you, who like is very open to you asking the professor to explain to you exactly in the way that you want, right? You can even tell it, one of the things I love is like you can tell it like, hey, I'm a musician, or I'm a this person. Could you use metaphors, right? And what I know to explain what's going on. So it's really, truly awesome, because all of us learn better when we have some kind of like context in our day-to-day life to be able to ground new learnings to.
Yeah, 100%. And I've also, I don't use ChatGPT. I use Claude for all of my stuff because I'm just more used to Claude at this point. But what I found is, when I'm in Cursor and like a piece of code isn't working or something isn't working as I expect it to work, I can go back and say, I can tell Cursor, hey, this thing isn't working. Can you kind of get it to work? And it goes to work and it kind of fixes it. But I often I found I never understood what actually happened. It gave me some technical term. I don't know, in the beginning, for example, it told me my NPM package isn't installed. I was like, what the heck is an NPM package? And I told it to, blah, blah. And I had to go to Cursor and I was like, I should maybe learn what an NPM package is because this seems very fundamental to this whole situation. So no, I think using it in combination with Claude or ChatGPT, at least my experiences has been, is the way to go. So one of the kind of things I've seen on social media is a lot of folks are saying that you can actually go ahead without previous coding experience and within a few days of training you can go ahead and build a full stack app. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah. Again, I think if it's somebody who has good product sense and is super, super motivated and is an inquisitive mind who will stop to no end to solve a problem, then yeah, I think that in a couple of days, you can get something done. The motivation part, I think, is really, really important because I have to say, one of the biggest barriers learning how to code isn't just the intellectual part. It's the emotions of failing and dealing with bugs and getting frustrated. There are times where I wanted to just throw my laptop on the ground because I realized, oh, shit, this is an off by one error and I don't know how to fix it. And sorry for the French. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that on the podcast. You can definitely edit that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if you have the motivation and you have a bit of product sense to start, it's definitely possible. I would say for most people, pick something that you are genuinely excited to build because that energy is going to drive you forward, right? That curiosity to get it to the end. The other caveat I'm going to give, which I think you kind of mentioned, is I also think that full stack could also mean a big scope, right? For myself, when I would say full stack for me is something that is a relatively uncomplicated app, right? But if there's anything that is slightly more complicated or requires, let's say, proper data encryption or security practices or requires a lot more complicated calculations in the back, things like that, that might be a bit out of maybe the scope for what you can learn in just a couple of days. So I wouldn't sit here saying hey, all software engineers are not going to have jobs anymore and everybody can now code in 6 days. I don't think that's 100% true, but I do think that if you're doing something that is more basic, right, that's not super complicated, then I think you actually really can get started in a couple of days with the right motivation.
I think something similar that I've seen online is a lot of people saying, hey, this can finally be your technical co-founder. And a lot of engineers and developers push back on this. But I think, I think they're both sort of talking past each other a little bit for the simple reason that I think you've highlighted a few key things there. First one, you talked about clear communication. I think when you're trying to build an app, you need to be very clear, very concise about what it is that you want to do, because you can't just say build an app and it's not just going to spit out a random app on the other side of it. You need to be very specific. What do you want? What does it look like? What are the functionalities? What are the features? So on, which is where a little bit of product literacy does come in very handy. And then the second thing you talked about there, sort of around, I think persistence is very key here. Because you're going to run into a lot of bugs, a lot of times where your code doesn't function like you want it to, and you sometimes have to go in reverse 3-4 steps back because something happened a while back that you didn't realize, but now you need to do it. So even though you don't actually need to learn how to code, you do need to learn how to think like a coder a little bit. Yeah. Right? If that makes sense. Okay, so let's get into, more concrete visual examples of you said that you built a Google Finance clone. I thought that was awesome. Are there any other cool examples that you've seen other people build or things that you've maybe built yourself?
Yeah, actually, I'll give an example for these two co-founding pairs that came to my AI course actually recently. So basically, they are two people that I would say don't have a regular technical background, right? So one person is a bit more of a kind of sales and marketing background. The other person is a gerontologist. So they basically study the science of and social science of getting older, right? And so they're building a SaaS platform basically for elder care workers, because the whole entire space is like 70% admin work, and when people are bogged down with admin, it's harder for them to be able to care that kind of one-to-one interaction with their patient, right? And the two of them actually have started already building some MVP for the app. And again, it's not a complicated solution. If you think about it, it's like there's some database where you have to manage patient data. You have regular tests that you update as well. You have scheduling logs, things like that. So that's what they're building. And again, I actually think it's something that because it's a pretty standard SaaS play, right? It's with a bit of an industry specific kind of twist on it, it's actually not too hard for two people to start out, and they're at that initial like prototyping stage where they're trying to sign on customers, right, and get them to start using some version of this app, and just start to get some data around how they're interacting with it. At some point, they are probably going to look to hire an engineering team and get somebody to build it to a level where you can have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on this platform and not worry about, okay, I didn't ever build a product at scale, so I didn't know this would happen, right? But it's such a great way to storytell and actually use it as a way to bring people maybe who are technical, because now they can see something, right? They're like, oh, wow, like you have some market validation for this. You already have customers who sign up for pilots, right? You have some you have a starting point, and now I know, okay, here's where I can like supercharge and add value and like make this platform really, really robust.
And when we get, okay, so are you by any chance using V0 by Vercel at this point, or have you not touched that yet?
Yeah. So V0 is like a Chat GPT, but sort of on crack. It can basically generate UI on the fly on one side with kind of code snippets of what is generating that UI as well. And then on the left-hand side is basically your conversation with V0. So if anyone has had any experience using Claude artifacts, it's actually quite similar, I would say, to artifacts, but I think better because there's more, it's a bit more powerful than I would say artifacts, and it's specifically well designed for UI, right? So how does this like fit into like someone's workflow versus using Cursor? Like I think V0 is kind of a better first step at kind of brainstorming and almost doing what I used to call the Figma mock-up step. So for those who don't know, Figma is a common tool used by designers to create prototypes and mock-ups that are visual. So V0 is really good for that. And you can basically like code while brainstorming designs, right? And once you have a design that you are happy with, you can actually copy the code in V0 and you can put it into Cursor and tell it to like translate that into a app that you can then deploy right on your local host when you're starting out. So that's what I use V0 for. I also use it for like other stuff like I used to have to bother people to write HTML for email campaigns, and now I just I do that within V0. I don't need to go to Cursor for that because HTML is a lot more simple, but I use V0 for that.
Okay, awesome. We've talked so much about Vercel and Cursor and so many other things. You obviously you are building a company. It's called Peak Money. I thought the copywriting for the landing page was pretty great. I think it goes something like your AI-powered personal CFO. Am I saying that right, or have I sort of skipped out a couple of things there?
Yeah, that's I would say the what is it, 4 or 5 words? That would be the short version of what we do. But the longer version is we say we're AI-powered platform that helps you track and grow net worth, right? Because people ask, okay, what exact CFO is a very it helps you imagine what that person in AI form would be, right? But what we do in a very basic functional sense is we're like one place where you can see all of your net worth in one place, right? So I don't know if you have a couple different accounts that you use to invest, but for myself, I have over 18 accounts. So it's a bit of a mess, right? So a big part of the value add that we have initially for users is just one place where I can see what's happening with my portfolio, my finances. So I'm like, okay, if I have a down payment for a house, I need to plan for in the next couple of years. I know what my liquid net worth is. This is what I can kind of, sell off to put towards that. Or, other people are like, I really just want to quit my job at Apple to just, work part-time or retire kind of early and just, have a little bit more autonomy, right? What does that pathway look like for me given my current standing, and how do I plan for passive income right past that age? So these are all questions that like you really need to have a starting point of like, okay, what do I have today, right, to figure that out. And then the AI part of it on top of it is where the insights come into play. Then we can start giving you a view of like, okay, what can you use it for? So if you are trying to optimize for like a certain growth rate of your investments, right? What are some of the leakiest investments you have? Like what's bottom 25% performing? What's the most volatile? You can just basically ask the app to do that, and then we'll give you the responses, right? And so that's the part that, we're kind of trying to push this beyond what mint.com or some of the typical trackers have done in the past. Is like we want to push it to the point where it's just like absurdly meaningful for somebody, right? Where they're like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to go to any other platform to answer these questions anymore. Peak has all of it in one place. Peak has my context across everything I do for finances, and it's able to generate those responses very quickly.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, I have the same problem where, I own assets in a few different countries. I have bank accounts in a few different countries. And tracking all of this gets really hard. And I feel as your net worth grows, like the swings get bigger and bigger, if stocks are going up or down or something else is going on. Did you build it because you had the same problem, or did you find like a group of users who had that problem and then you built it for them?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. So before Peak, I've been building in fintech for years. I've been doing fintech since 2017. So I would say like on both sides, right? The idea came up. So when I was working on my previous venture called Blue Jay before Peak, I was looking to democratize private credit or private market assets for like emerging affluent kind of high earning kind of investors, right? So the people that, have enough savings were like, hey, like knowing what I'm doing is kind of important because the swings are 5 digits now, but you're not at the level where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to pay like a external asset manager or like family office, like a boatload of money to manage it, right? Like that's the target segment. And we realized from talking to people about, hey, is your challenge around accessing alternative assets or private market assets? When we're talking about that problem with them, it seemed like it was more of a nice to have, but almost everybody complained about the tooling that they had. They're like, you know what, like I don't even know how to invest in this. Like, where should I allocate? What should I allocate in my portfolio? I'm not sure exactly how much I have, and interest rates are kind of all whack right now. How should I think about, my strategy? So then that's actually like what kind of triggered one of those thoughts of like, hey, there's really an opportunity here. For myself, this is also a problem, right? Now I don't use it anymore, but I had been using a spreadsheet just like everybody else for years, actually, right? I'm somebody who's like, I would say like financial, like sometimes like personal finance ADHD, right? There's just so much going on, and not all brokerages do a very good job of letting you like cut the data in different ways. Like it's not like you have I have the data in front of me and I have Python and I can do the math, right? Like that's not how it really works, right? So if it takes me an hour to refresh and figure out those questions, it's a lot harder to want to do as much analysis as I can, right?
I saw you shared this on LinkedIn. There's a sort of, Business Insider article about it as well. You were able to build $1 million portfolio. You're sort of, managing it yourself. Is it cool if I ask you a little bit about that and how you built that up over time?
So I guess to answer your question about like, how I, managed to kind of build it over time, I think it was a combination of discipline, of luck, and just risk taking. So I was very, very lucky that I was able to work in big tech at the right time, right? I mean, I started working, kind of mid 2010s, big tech companies like Amazon and Google. Just When I joined Amazon, the stock was sub 300. And it was like 270. Like it was just, this was before Alexa launched. This was before Prime Now. It was before so much shit. Like it's just right time. Like I think I was that person who I was a business major, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to be a banker or like a consultant. Like tech seems like it's where it's at, right? Like where else do you see crazy growth? So I got very lucky, right? I joined Amazon, joined Google, and a big part of like my wealth growth really came from like the growth of my ESOPs. My RSUs. So I would attribute nearly 50% of it actually just to like the growth of my Google and Amazon shares, right? Just like holding on to them and them also doing very well during that time as well, which obviously changed after 2022. So that was one part of it, is just like luck. I think the second part is discipline. So I'm somebody who has a mother who like got me into like basically like drilled the discipline of like never holding cash in a bank account, like from the early days. She's like, you need to if you don't know what to put your money in, just put it into SPY, right? Or put it into QQQ. And like, if you don't know what amount you should put in, just pick a random allocation, like 50, 25, 25, and just roll with it. And then eventually you'll learn enough where you can like start applying additional layers of critical thinking to like a proper allocation. But she would just tell me to do that. And I started to get into that habit, right? Anytime I got my annual bonus, I don't spend it. Like, I'm not like, hey, let's go to Vegas and buy a table. I'm always like, all right, let's put this into stocks like right away. So, it's that discipline. And I still have it today, right? Where, I don't like keeping that much cash around on the sidelines. I make sure I always, you work so hard to earn your money. You got to make your money work for you after you get it. And I'd say the third one is probably like, I do have a bit of this YOLO-ness in myself. Like I would say that I do have a barbell strategy when it comes to investing. And my barbell is probably a bit bigger on the risk side than high risk side than maybe other people. Like I'm willing to go up to like 35% on like, individual riskier bets than, as 80%, right? And some of my earlier like YOLO investments have just paid off, right? But yeah, I think it's a combination of those three things: a little bit of luck, getting right time, right place in the growth industries, discipline, and risk taking.
Yeah, I think, again, not financial advice, but I found that, early on, if you really want that jump in net worth, if you really want it, then, you have to take a little bit of risk there. I think we're coming to the end, so I just want to ask you a couple more questions.
Sure.
Again, reading through socials, you'd mentioned that you had a 200K salary at Google, but then you kind of dropped down from that when you became a founder. You've also moved from the US to Singapore. I think those are both, very interesting choices. Most people are never able to leave the golden handcuffs. I was in the exact same position for a very long time. I had a similar salary, found it very hard to just, drop down from that and become a founder and just essentially pay myself nothing for a certain amount of time. And then I also relocated, you relocated to Singapore, I relocated to Dubai. I'd love to hear about your experiences, what went through your mind as you kind of went through that founding journey of, maybe sitting at your desk, making all that money to where you are today?
I think one of my values in life is that I want to live the most interesting story for myself, right? Because we only get one life, right? And I was just thinking like, can I really just for the next like 15, 20 years, just like day in, day out, do more like privacy reviews, do another like, it's going to take 3 weeks to push this feature forward. And I'm going to be sitting there and like waiting for it to happen. Like a very reactive approach to a career, right? And that's at least how I felt at Google, right? So for me, like it made sense at some point just to take the leap because I just felt like I like couldn't imagine like me feeling me being in that job day in and day out anymore. I just want to feel more passion, more like I want to just pour my all into something and just like see it kind of come to life. So after like 6 months of thinking that way, I took the plunge. I think I make a lot of life decisions sort of based on emotion, actually, which is very weird because you're in a tech space. You're supposed to be very logical, right? A very thinking person. But I believe that human happiness has to come from emotions. Logic is just there to downside protect you from making dumb decisions in the pursuit of happiness. But for me, I'm like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm like, I have money that I've saved up. Singapore at the time was actually relatively like not as expensive as doing this in San Francisco. I was like, look, if all else fails, and let's say I freaking hate my life being a founder and like, you know what, like I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, I'm sure I'll find something else. Let's give it like 6 months and see. And once I started to think about like what's the worst that can happen, I was like, look, it's like you have uncapped upside and you have a capped downside. The downside is like, okay, you have 6 months where like you didn't earn anything and you didn't like your life. But like you need to do that sometimes to realize like what that potential could be. And that's exactly what I found. Like I cannot imagine my life not having been a startup founder over the last 3 years. Like it's not even like I learned all this work experience, but just like in terms of just enriching your life, right? Like I get to be surrounded by just amazing human beings who all like decided to take a risk because they cared so much about a user problem or they just wanted to do something more for the world. Like how can you not like being in an environment like that and earning your place in that environment too as a fellow founder? So I don't think any amount of like, okay, comfortable corporate salary would convince me to like not do this. So I do it as long as I can, right? That's how I feel.
I had a very similar experience, and I think, the part about wanting to live an interesting life is very important, and I felt the same way. And the part about emotion as well, right? I think, a lot of times I kind of, tune into a podcast or I watch a video or I watch something, and I feel like the person is under pressure to justify why they did what they did. But having gone through the journey and having spoken to other folks candidly behind the scenes who've gone through the journey, a lot of times like this isn't really a rational decision. Yeah. And I think rational is, again, I think it's important to maybe define words a little bit, right? I think there's rational and there's logical. For me, rational takes both logic and emotion into account. Whereas logic is just purely logical, right? So I feel like if you've picked a life path that is extremely logical, but you wake up logical in the sense of financial outcome maybe or minimizing optimizing your risk, sure. But if you wake up every day hating what you do or you don't enjoy it or you long for something else, then you basically at the end of the day are gonna live a life of regret.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And some people are going to be okay with that. I personally didn't find that I was going to be okay with that, and I'm glad that I went this way.
I'm 100% with you, Zane. And actually, like, now that I've been down this road, like, if, like, let's say worst case scenario, right? Like, this all doesn't work out. I don't think I'm going to go back to a corporate job either, because now I've actually, like, gotten comfortable and more knowledgeable about how you can actually like make money not having a job, but like creating a brand for yourself or like creating other services or doing things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure there are multiple other options, right? That don't require like me going back to it. Again, it's like, it's not like going to a corporate job is a bad thing for some people, right? They want the stability. They don't want they like the, hey, my income comes and it's exactly this amount every single month and I don't want it to deviate. I have a family to worry about. Like, great. Like, I think that's fine. Like, for me, I'm just a bit more of a cowboy. I think, like, I don't have a concept of like, hey, I have to live in this place for the next 10 years of my life. I have to be doing this job for the next 10 years. I'm kind of like, do I love this today? Do I like the people I work with today? Do I like the country? Do I love living in Singapore at this moment? And I'm like, that's all good. Like, I choose what I want to choose today. I wake up and I go to bed good with that decision and I'm happy. And sometimes I ask myself that question 365 days and I realize I lived a year of that decision, which feels to some people like commitment, right? But to me, it's like, no, it's a active choice that I've made. So that's kind of how I generally live my life, which, obviously can come with like some variability, but it's what I find most interesting. And I want to watch a movie of my life and find it interesting.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great place to end the conversation. Sherry, is there anything you wanted to say that I haven't asked you yet?
I mean, we didn't get to talk about Singapore, but that's okay.
What's it like being a founder there? Like, what's the startup scene? What's the tech scene like there? What do founders need to know if they want to move there?
Yeah. I think amongst the non-US, non-Silicon Valley startup hubs, I think it's great. I mean, there are so many communities that you can get involved in, both casual as well as like more like formalized member communities. And so I've never really felt super alone building a company here. I started in an incubator. I live in a house with other founders. There's 4 founders that live under the same roof. So it's like a bit of a hacker house, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, it's super fun. I mean, obviously you have to create environments where you meet people because it's, again, not like the Bay Area where like you walk down the street and that person's a founder and that person's a founder. You have to be maybe like a few steps more deliberate than just like wake up and go to Market Street. But it's not bad. The other part I like about Singapore is like it's a good blend of like a ecosystem with a lot of founders, especially like as a hub for Southeast Asia, right? People building for companies in other markets in Southeast Asia tend to like to be incorporated and work in Singapore. So on that end, it's pretty vibrant. But at the same time, it's not like the most established ecosystem. So what I like about it is you can kind of play a bigger role beyond just yourself here. So that's so in a way like it's a bit more, it feels more like community. Like everyone kind of knows each other and like, we're all trying to like build up the Singapore ecosystem together and everything. So I like being a founder here. Like, actually I was describing to people that I feel like Singapore is like a real life Wakanda because it's like jungly and like got very green, but like it looks so futuristic. Like the buildings are just like state of the art, right? Like people don't really talk about Singapore's architecture, but it's actually pretty world famous. Like architects love it here because every building's unique and everything. And it's so like well planned out, like from a sustainability perspective as well, right? And you can see it like physically manifest where you have these like buildings with like vines around them, and I'm sure some of them have their like energy conservation components. So it is super futuristic, right? It's like if human beings got their shit together at the highest level of politics and decided to think, how can we design something that moves things forward? I think that's what Singapore looks like. It's very hard for U.S. cities to pull that off sometimes, unfortunately, but that's okay.
All right. That being said, I think this is a nice place to close things out. So thank you so much for making this time.
Yeah, no, thank you so
enjoyed
much. Yeah, same here. Same here. Thank you so much for having me on. I love the conversation.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and please subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Take care. Bye-bye.